Thank you everyone for being here today, and it's a pleasure to give you this lecture, which I think will be a bit controversial. I want you to be able to interrupt the lesson and ask for questions. If there is something you don't understand, ask immediately our lovely translator, because she will translate it for you. All right? Now, today's lesson, it's going to be a hot topic in the history of art, a controversial time period. It's the moment when classicism dies after 600 years of uninterrupted accumulation of knowledge, because classicism is the knowledge of several generations accumulating. And classicism is, in my opinion, murdered. It was not a natural death, it was deliberate. And it's quickly replaced by what we call modernism, styles that we say are very modern. Of course, they've got nothing modern. For example, abstract art, it's not modern. It exists since prehistory. The problem is that we don't know enough history of art. So, because we are ignorant, we think those styles are revolutionary. No, they're not. Abstract art you already find in Neolithic ceramics. Abstract decorations, you find it in art that is at least 60,000 years old. There's nothing revolutionary about abstract art. Conceptual art. Do you know conceptual art? Marcel Duchamp, ready-mades. Do you know what's a ready-made? It's when you find an object on the streets, you bring it to the gallery and you say this is a piece of art. Now, art historians nowadays and museums and curators, the art industry, the capitalist market of art pretends that ready-mades are very revolutionary and they're very contemporary. Rubbish. Ready-mades exist since prehistory. Marcel Duchamp didn't invent anything. When you find a shell on a beach, you make a hole, you turn it into a pendant of a necklace, and you give it magical powers, so it becomes an amulet. It's a ready-made and it's conceptual art. All civilizations always had that. Modern art did not invent anything. Instead, in my opinion, what we witnessed was a massive decay of artistic abilities and qualities. Nowadays, you can do a pile of rubbish and call it a sculpture, which is fine, and I am not against that in principle. Sometimes it's necessary. What I am against is how that mentality contaminated all the art institutions nowadays. So it became academic. Contemporary art became extremely conservative. Extremely conservative. Because if it does not look contemporary, then it's banned, it's censored. There is nothing more conservative than forcing yourselves to always look contemporary. So this lack of freedom that you see nowadays in the arts, it stems, in my opinion, from the murder of classical technique. Now, the image you are looking at is a drawing course that was invented in the 19th century. It's called the Bargue course, because the artist that made the course was called Charles Bargue. France was facing an artistic disaster. The French students could not draw anymore. The art schools were very bad, and France did not have good artists. So the French government saw the problem, and they asked one of the best living artists of that time, Jean-Léon Gérôme, to create a drawing course. But in the 19th century, art teachers were real artists. They were very busy painting, making images. They did not have time to teach. We'll talk about that later. So the teaching methods of the 19th century, they are very different from the teaching methods nowadays. In the 19th century, they were real masters of painting. They did not have time to teach. So, instead, they would delegate on their best students the teaching. The way it would work in the 19th century is that the master would come to imagine this university, maybe 2 or 3 times a week maximum, because they are busy making masterpieces. They would teach only the best students, the more advanced students, imagine 20 students in this university. And then the advanced students would have to teach all the intermediate students, and then the intermediate students would teach the beginners. So the knowledge of one master could reach thousands of people by using this pyramid model. So, Jean-Léon Gérôme was asked to do a drawing course, but he didn't have time. He asked his student Charles Bargue to create the course, following Jérôme's instructions, of course. So this is an example of an image that belongs to the drawing course. In this course you see how to start this image. You begin like this. So you work exclusively with zigzags, no curves, to check if all the angles are correct. If you do curves, you cannot check angles, it's impossible. Bad artists use curves. Good artists know that zigzags are much better to get the good proportion. After the proportion is correct, you draw the shadow shape. The shape of the shadow. Shadows have a shape. That's drawn there. But initially, look at this. All the details, all the ups and downs, mountains and valleys, they're simplified. One zag is enough. Zig. To describe the angle. Until the angle is correct, there is no point in drawing the details, because everything will be wrong. You need first the correct angle. This is just an example of a little bit of classical knowledge in drawing, classical technique. This course was made for children aged 11 years old. Yes, this was the minimum quality that 11-year-old children were expected to have in the 19th century to go and study art. We really decayed. I consider, and I'm going to say something controversial, I think we never had as bad art as nowadays. We are the least artistic civilization ever, and that includes prehistory, because we lost all connection with the deeper meaning of art, and we lost all connection with technique as well. Now, this is for 11-year-olds. Because it's for children, it's highly, highly simplified. This man is drawn more or less with only 4 shades of gray. So, this color is the same as that color, and the same as that color, and the same as that color, and the same here, and the same there, on purpose. The Bargue method shows you that you can hyper-simplify reality and still create a very, very convincing final drawing. How do you think that those masters of the past could create those huge paintings and so fast? They learned the art of simplification. Nowadays, K-pop generation, you have a big problem, because when young people try to copy an image, I notice they put too much detail everywhere. The image just looks boring, and it looks like a bad copy of a photograph. In classical art, it's considered a big mistake to copy all the details. It's a big mistake. In classical art, people learn to simplify, so the image looks more poetic, so it looks more iconic than reality itself. It was extremely popular, the drawing course. An example is Picasso. We associate Picasso with Cubism, but Picasso had some classical training. So Picasso drew this Bargue plate when he was 11 or 12 years old, I think 12. Because remember, this course was made for 11-year-old children. There are thousands of drawings from the 19th century with this quality that were made by children. When Van Gogh started, he was not a natural talent at all. Van Gogh was not gifted for art initially. The next drawing by Van Gogh as well. When he started the Bargue course. The Bargue course allowed him to start to draw like this. Can we see the previous image again? Look how bad. Van Gogh, he liked so much the Bargue course that he copied the 197 images of the drawing course. And he liked it so much that he did it twice in his lifetime. The first time he copied the 197 lithographic plates of the Bargue course, and then a few years later, he restarted the Bargue course again. The second time he didn't copy everything, but he still copied half of the images. Until mid-19th century, charcoal was not used in art, with very few exceptions. Tintoretto used charcoal, for example. Anyway, it was usually not used for permanent drawings that should last. Why? Because they didn't have fixative, the sprays that you use nowadays to fix a drawing. Fixative had not been invented. And because fixative was not invented, didn't exist yet, they didn't use charcoal. They used instead black shale. So how do you say that in Indonesian?
Black shale itu batu bara.
Some types of batu bara, some types of black shale have a very high content of carbonaceous substances, carbon-based stone, and a bit oily. With that kind of shale, you can draw. Of course, you cannot erase it. You cannot rub off, do you understand? But you can draw. So I'll show you now an example. We've seen the Bargue course for children, 11-year-old children. Now we're going to look at academic drawings from the 19th century in the academies, inside the art schools. And the drawings you're going to see, they were all made by students your age, between 18 and 21 years old. So let's start with the first drawing, which is done in black shale. So remember, these drawings you could not erase. If you make a mistake, the mistake stays. These drawings have to be made without any corrections. And they are large drawings. They are almost the size of the projection. Almost the size of this projection. And they are exam drawings. These are exams. You draw by looking directly from a sculpture. Of course, you don't project, you don't trace. Of course, it's a real drawing technique. Nowadays, I'm sorry, but if I asked most of you to draw that, you couldn't. And most of you would try to trace or project the image and copy. It's a big problem, okay, that we have in art institutions. Now, there was a time limit. It all had to be done in less than 12 hours. Did you hear that? Only 12 hours to make this full drawing using a stone. It's not even pencil or charcoal. So this one is by a Portuguese, by the way, Henrique Pousão. He was 21 years old, of course, when he drew that. So the next image you are going to see is an exam piece by John Singer Sargent. Remember, all these drawings are always from real objects. Remember that charcoal is very, very messy. It's very powdery. It's difficult to use charcoal and create a very fine result. This one is already charcoal, because there was fixative. He was 18 years old when he made this drawing. Again, it must be made in less than 12 hours, because it's an exam. When you did your exams to come to this university, you remember the drawings you had to do. So it's the same. Okay? I repeat, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of drawings from this period where all the students were equally good. This is another example. And now start to notice some of the criteria that make a good classical drawing. Example number 1, hypersimplification in the shadows. All the shadows have a very similar color to each other. You have almost just 5 shades of gray in this image. You don't need to create thousands and thousands and thousands of different shades of gray to make an image look complex. No, it's the opposite. You need the lowest number of grays that you can get away with. The lowest number of grays that still creates the illusion of complexity. When you hit that sweet spot, not too much, not too less. Somewhere there, you create images that look visually very complex, they look very real, but at the same time, very poetic. All the shadows are simple. There's maybe 2-3 colors in the shadows maximum. You've got almost black that appears in several places. Almost black. You have a very, very, very dark gray that appears in the reflected lights. And again, it repeats itself in many different parts of the shadow. And sometimes you have a lighter gray for some of the lighter shadows. So there's maybe 3 tones of gray in the shadows. Now let's look at the lights. Same rule, hypersimplification of the lights. All the lights look luminous. There is nothing in the area that belongs to the light that was made dark. Never. Even if in reality that appears. Reality is not artistic enough. You have to correct reality to create an iconic image. In the lights, there's maybe 3 shades of gray. You have white, you have the palest gray that you can see, and you have a very pale gray. All the lights are represented like that. And finally, where is the real complexity? Where? Everything has got muscles. Maybe what you meant is what is called the terminator. The terminator is the line that separates shadow from light. Next to the terminator, you put a lot of detail. Next to the terminator, you make it more real. And by making your terminators hyper-realistic, but the shadows and the lights simplistic, you create the best of both worlds. You make a hyper-real image that still has an iconic, poetic quality that only simplified images have. You combine both. So the next drawing is even clearer. In the fine art programs of the 19th century, you would start with the Bargue course, where you copy from a drawing, because that's easier. Next, you copy from sculptures. And the sculptures were usually made of plaster, because then you can have copies of sculptures sent all across Europe. You know, if you have a Greek sculpture in, I don't know where, in England nowadays, then you can make a cast, you can make a copy, and send it to all the art schools all across Europe. And you have an example of classical sculpture. So this is also made with charcoal. And these drawings are representing what I said. The shadows are flat and mysterious. You don't see details inside the shadows. The shadows are always simplified. Always. The extreme lights, the same. You don't detail. They're flat and luminous. It's in the mid-tones, especially next to terminators, that you put all the detail. And this is a choice. This is not how reality looks like. This is a stylistic choice. This drawing was made by Ingres, Ingres was the leading painter in France before the Bargue course was invented. It's an example of an excellent drawing. I mean, it's beautiful. A drawing made by a master. So it's not just only copy, copy, copy. No, there's already interpretation. Certain areas are violent and cartoonish. It looks like a comic from nowadays, comics. This could be a Marvel sketch. Before Superman flies, first they make a sketch. In the world of comics, classical knowledge was preserved during the 20th century. It's quite ironic. It was actually the commercial arts that preserved knowledge. It was the so-called fine arts that murdered knowledge. Anyway, paradox of life. But you see something very important in classical drawing. You need a focal point. A focal point is where your attention goes to. Do you understand? In this case, of course, it's the face. The face was rendered with much more detail and much more contrast than anywhere else. But a second focal point that creates an echo, 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 because you always need an echo, echo, you need a dialogue. A second focal point is this area of the hat. So there is a dialogue between these two areas. Everything else is deliberately secondary, including the background. There is a fountain here with water coming out, but it was left vague on purpose. You are going to see now real classical academic drawing from the 19th century and early 20th century. These are drawings made in fine art academies. So this is an example from the Russian school of drawing. The Russian drawings are usually more dramatic. And in the Russian drawings, you don't copy what you see. You conceptualize the shape in space. You use your intelligence, your spatial intelligence, to understand which are the planes that are facing the light and which are the planes that are facing away from the light. And then you shade accordingly, even if in nature you don't see that. I must insist, you cannot be good artists if you are just a slave either to nature or to styles. This goes beyond that. So, you have these incredible drawings. This was maybe made in 2 or 3 hours. Because classical artists, when they're good, they're the fastest artists ever. I don't know how much you can draw in 2 or 3 hours, but I am certain you can't do this. And remember again, zigzags. We already talked about zigzags. Look, zig, zag, zigzag, zig, zigzag, zig, zigzag, zig, zig. Almost everything was created with straight lines. But you create the illusion of curves by making your zigzags smaller and smaller, more and more detailed. But there's hardly any curve in there. It's almost everything straight lines with zigzags. So next example. These incredible drawings made by 20-year-old students. Again, from life. And you see all the qualities of classical drawing that I was telling you before. Hypersimplification of the shadows. Actually, they're so simple that you cannot even see where the body ends and the background begins. It's all fused into one color. Reality doesn't look like that. This is better than reality. It creates a much more mysterious type of shadow. Hypersimplification in the light. All the lights are practically the same color. In reality, it's not like that. I'm sure his arms, for example, were much darker than his torso or than his hips. Because in the 19th century, people didn't walk around naked. So I'm sure his face and arms were much more tanned than the rest of the body. But the artist chose not to draw that distraction and instead concentrate on more quintessential fundamentals of good art, like shape, luminosity, mysterious qualities. It's much better than drawing the exact color of the hand or the exact color of the bum. You know, it's irrelevant. So another fantastic drawing. And where do you have the details? Tell me. Near the Terminator. So along the Terminator, that's where you have more detail. Can you see that? Most of the details were drawn just along the Terminator, near the Terminator. And another characteristic, you can really feel the difference between hard parts of the body and soft parts of the body. You can feel the different types of consistency of the flesh. You know for sure that this is very soft. This is soft. You know that the top of the shoulder is hard. You can see the different textural qualities of the body. This is great drawing. It's not just copying shapes. It transcends that. You even copy consistencies and textures, physical textures, palpable textures. Again, the Russian school of drawing, they're more dramatic, they're more... if you want, I don't like to use this word because it's not a critique, but they're more cartoonish. It's more like illustration, it's more like comics. Why? I told you already. What? Simplification and conceptualization. The Russians use spatial intelligence and then they shade to represent the changes in planes, the changes of angle of surfaces. Even if in reality they don't see a change in color. For example, maybe in reality this shadow was not there, this was flatter, almost for sure. But the artist wanted to represent that this muscle is different from that muscle. The anatomy needs to change. So you still represent the shadow, even if you don't see it in reality. Does this make sense to you? Because you are expressing tactile qualities. If you go with your hands and you feel the body, you would feel the ups and downs of the anatomy, even if the light circumstances don't show it. Fine arts universities in Europe, they have thousands of drawings from that period that are just as good as the ones I've shown you. Those drawings are never exhibited. Art museums, they have incredible paintings from the 19th century that are always hidden in the reserves. We are always looking at the same things. We are always looking at Picasso, Van Gogh, Mondrian, always the same names. There were thousands and thousands of artists, just as good as these, or in my opinion, much better than these.